Baha'i Focus. Baha'i Focus today is coming to you from Oakdale Park in Carbondale. And we have a special guest with us today. His name is Morris Taylor from Evanston. Morris is a Baha'i. And tell us, how long have you been a Baha'i?
Well, Joe, first of all, let me say what a pleasure it is to be in Carbondale. This is my first visit. And the opportunity to be on your program, Baha'i Focus, is a rare one for me, and I appreciate the invitation. I have been a Baha'i for about 13 years. I'm originally from Virginia. I came to the Chicago area via Bermuda, where I lived for a couple of years, helping to teach the Baha'i faith. I became a Baha'i indirectly through a high school history teacher who was very unusual in her ways of teaching. She did some rather different things in her classes. And at one point in the year, for about a 2-week period, she brought in different religions. She brought in the black Muslims and the Mormons and Mennonites and so forth. And the last group she brought in were the Baha'is. And they answered questions about the faith and passed out literature. Well, quite frankly, at that time, I wasn't terribly interested in religion, and I wasn't terribly impressed by the Baha'i presentation. But oddly enough, about 2 years later, I was cleaning out a drawer to pack to go to college, and I found one of their pamphlets, and I read it, and in the time it took to read that pamphlet, I was convinced that the Baha'i faith was what the world needed, and it had the key to my own spiritual development.
It's interesting that when you first were exposed to it, you weren't that interested, and yet later something changed in your life that made something click.
It's interesting because during that 2-year period between the time I first heard of it and the time I actually became a Baha'i, it was the time that I stopped reading just the comics in the sports section and started reading the front news and current events and so forth. And I think that had a lot to do with it, just the maturing on my part. There were a lot of things going on in the world, and I think that 2-week period where the different religions spoke to the class was a real catalyst for me, because up until then I just didn't realize the differences, how sharp they were, how significant they were in the way people represented their faiths. I didn't realize the fanaticism involved, because some of them were quite fanatic. Some came in with film strips, some of them beat on the desk, some of them, really, you'd better follow us or you're going to hell, that kind of thing. And it was quite a shock to my little, junior year system. And at that time, it was hard to see my way clear to any of them. In fact, I think I came away from that 2-year period as an agnostic, saying, this is crazy. Either God likes all of this or he doesn't like any of it.
I think that's a similar approach that I came into it with also, is you could see that there was truth there somewhere. There's an underlying foundation of truth, but you look at the different groups and it sure wasn't there.
No.
No. I think that that's very important. You mentioned that it took you 2 years of really not even investigating the Baha'i faith before you accepted it. And the Baha'is have a very informal, it's a more mature approach to teaching people, I think, where they will give you the information and they will answer your questions if you have any, but they never force, and they never pound tables and scream. And I think that's good, because people mature at different levels and different ages, and you never can tell when someone is ready. But there will come a time in the people's life, I think, when they are ready. And
I think that impresses a lot of people who are investigating the faith, too, that we are not allowed to proselytize, that we don't, hunt people down and search hither and yonder for converts. It's not that way at all. Rather, through our way of life, the way we raise our families, the way we serve the community, and the way we worship God, we try to lead through example and show people that there is indeed a God, that he loves mankind, and that from age to age he sent a messenger. And in this age we live in that seems so confused and on the brink sometimes of disaster, politically and economically and in every way possible, Baha'is are saying, hey, there is a God, he knows what's going on, and he has provided a way for us to put this world of disorder back into order. And it's through his messenger for this day, Baha'u'llah.
That's something that I hear fairly often. People say, another prophet has come, a new messenger has come. Why do we need a new one? We've got so many old ones that we haven't lived up to yet. Why do we have a new one?
It's interesting. In the Bhagavad Gita, which is a book used by Hindus around the world, Krishna says to one of the disciples that from age to age I am born again. Whenever there is a decay in righteousness and morality, the divine spirit comes again to renew morals and to
Right.
re-educate mankind. Well, that in essence is the view of the Baha'i faith. We believe that from age to age God has sent a messenger to mankind to teach him what he needs to know for that particular time in history, that particular part of the world. Why do we need another? I think when we look at our Judeo-Christian background, we have a wonderful example from Jesus where he pointed out that I didn't come to break the law of Moses but to fulfill it. I'm not here to argue with your past teachings but simply give them a new meaning in light of the age that we live in now. So a new messenger comes simply because the times change, and the laws and principles which guided mankind generations ago are going to be very different. A perfect example is the technological age that we live in now. The kinds of moral and ethical problems that we have to deal with now on all levels are so foreign to anything our great-grandparents were familiar with, much less 2,000 years ago when Jesus walked, or when Moses walked and taught, or when Krishna or Muhammad or so forth. So in this day, God has sent us a messenger who first of all restates, re-enunciates the spiritual principles, which are the same in every religion, and then gives us new social principles which help us to deal with the environment, the scenario that we're living in today's age, including the technology that's so vastly different from anything we've seen before.
I think you hit on a point there that is very important, that humanity and society, I think in many ways, degenerates into chaos, and it appears to happen in cycles. And that is another reason why the prophets appear. That, for example, the rabbi in town here says that there is nothing new in the teachings of Jesus, that you can take every one of his teachings and find it somewhere in the rabbinical writings. However, Jesus was more than that. He gave a focus to it.
Yes.
He said, this is what's true. You know, there's this much else in the rabbinical writings, but he gave it a focus and a direction and a purpose, and he channeled it. And his purpose was to unify people in this direction.
Yes.
And so that is why, in this chaotic age, a new prophet has come once again. There are so many different opinions. In many ways, I think this is the day of judgment foretold in the holy books. And part of the judgment that is coming upon us is the judgment is being brought upon ourselves. The judgment comes from within as opposed to from without. And it's the clash of the cultures. You have the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews and the Sikhs and all these different religious groups on the world, all saying, my way is the way. And as they lose more and more power, and as people turn away, they become more and more conservative and fundamentalist, and it's a phenomenon of our age.
That's one of the interesting things about the Baha'i faith. Very often people look at the faith and they say, well, it's just a very unusual ecumenical movement, and that they're working very hard to kind of compromise all the religions and say, okay, we all really kind of agree, and why don't we work together? A kind of artificial unity is what they're implying. And instead, what Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, has said is that this is no artificial unity. There's no compromise at all. In fact, all the religions are one. They've always been one. They were designed by God and given to mankind as one. It's mankind that has chopped them up. Again, looking at our Judeo-Christian background, Jesus said, if you had believed in Moses, you'd believe in me. The same thing. All the religious teachers have always said, I am not the first, I'm not the last. And in time, God will send you another messenger. I think the confusion appears to be in the teachings.
The one fold and the one shepherd that they all spoke about, and the coming together. One of the cardinal signs of recognizing the new age is the return of the Jews to Israel. And that's one thing I say to people when I tell them about the Baha'i faith. Look at Israel, it's there. You know, Israel is there, where's the Messiah? And the Baha'is are saying, he's here, this is it. One other thing I was thinking about when you were speaking there was there are many first century Christian writings that are not in the Bible that I found in Morris Library at SIU here. And one of the passages that really struck me when I was reading the writings of Clement, who was a traveling companion of Peter, Clement said that the Christ has appeared many times in the past, and he has only more recently appeared as Jesus. And it's interesting that this is a first century Christian teaching that has been lost somewhere along the line, and it's in perfect harmony with the Baha'i
left out
teachings.
of the books.
I'm sure.
Let's
shift gears here a little bit. The Baha'i faith claims that they will be instrumental in creating peace upon the earth. Do you think that peace is a hopeless fantasy, or do you think it's reality? Taking into consideration all the warring factions and the governments and the religious groups and the ethnic groups and the races and all the different elements.
Well, you know,
how can we possibly bring it together?
One of the very unfortunate situations that we're facing as a species is that we have this historical precedent that says that man's nature is incorrigible, and really he is a warring species, and we might as well reconcile ourselves to that and be done with it. And I think that that's so ironic, because actually the peoples of the world want peace. And yet in the backs of their minds they have this feeling that really peace isn't possible. By our nature, we can't do that. More and more, I think, in the 20th century, you're finding people who want peace, who are working for peace, in some very unusual places, not just in the West, where we think we're so enlightened and so forth. Also behind the Iron Curtain, in Africa, in Asia, all over the world, people are saying, we want peace, we need peace, what can we do for peace? I think there are two main reasons for this. First of all, I think the age in which we live has made people want peace more. We're living in the age of enlightenment. We have done more in terms of technological advancement in the last 100 years than we have done in all of mankind's recorded history. You look at things like television, and satellites, and computers, and, wristwatches.
Right.
The darndest things that we take for granted now. 100 years ago, we were still in the horse and buggy, and now we're on the moon. So first of all, people say, in this enlightened age, isn't it even conceivable that we could have peace? I mean, we should be able to do that. The other thing I think that really is pushing people to look for peace, the other main reason, is the stakes. We're living in an age where, unfortunately, all of our technological advancement has not always been prompted by the most humanitarian motives. And instead of just technology for the advancement and betterment of mankind, we have the threat of nuclear war like we have never had it before. We have countless nations now that have the technology and the materials, many more that are trying to get it. And we're at a point now where we can destroy this earth many times over. With that kind of potential, always here, omnipresent, somehow we have got to come to grips with our true natures and our oneness so that we can work together to avoid that kind of catastrophe. And I think all of these things are impressing themselves on the common person, and they're saying, wait a minute, this is crazy. We can't allow this to happen. We really are one, aren't we? And so people are working for peace more and more. So yes, peace is possible, and I think it's going to come through the will of the common people. That it will come, and that Baha'u'llah and the teachings that he has given mankind for this day are going to be instrumental in helping people to see how it can work. In other words, unfortunately, we have no model. Even if all the peoples of the world say, yeah, let's do it, let's have peace, there's still the question of, well, by golly,
government structure, which economic theory, whatever.
Sure. And in the Baha'i faith, as unbelievable as it may seem, Baha'u'llah wrote over 100 volumes, and in many of them he details a blueprint for world order, a blueprint for world peace, a structure for a political organization that is equitable, that is just, that is world-embracing, and that we know works because the Baha'i community around the world right now uses that model. In the Baha'i faith, we have represented over 2,112 different races, tribes, and ethnic groups. Our literature has been translated in over 750 languages. So when people say, you can't bring all these different races and peoples and cultures together, we say, hey, not only is it possible, the Baha'i community is doing it right now, in microcosm to be sure. And
we
yet
know it's possible because we've done it. We've done it.
Exactly. And it's also inevitable. It's inevitable. It's going to happen.
2 years ago, the supreme body of the Baha'i faith, the Universal House of Justice, came out with a peace plan, a peace statement.
Yes.
What basically were they saying?
The Universal House of Justice, as you point out, is the supreme administrative body of the Baha'i world. And basically what they did was they outlined the historical causes of world disorder and then gave a plan for putting that disorder into order, for bringing about world peace, a global consciousness, a global community. The peace statement, as it's called, is addressed to all the peoples of the world. It's very holistic in its approach. It encompasses all the possible problems leading to world disorder and shows how we can resolve them. For example, they outline the most basic problems in the world today, which include racism, the disparity between rich and poor, the inequality between the sexes, religious strife is a very big problem in the world, the fact that we cannot all communicate with the same language, unbridled and fanatical nationalism is a major problem. These are among the most basic problems which they outline, and they give us an historical perspective, and they show how those old ways of thinking are destroying humanity in this modern age. And then they give us solutions, ways to work through them based entirely on the revelation of Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. And then at the end they point out that what we really are going to have at some point is we're going to have a world gathering, a convocation, so to speak, of the political leaders of the world coming together through a democratic process where all the peoples and tribes and countries of the world are represented to form a world tribunal which can legislate and make decisions for the betterment of the entire world. For example, you look at World War II. You know, no one really asked the world, is this a good idea? Is this something that's going to help us? No, there were a handful of countries who went into war and almost destroyed civilization as we know it. A world tribunal would say, wait, there is another way to do this. We do not have to jeopardize the lives of 5 billion people on this planet just to solve a silly dispute over land. This is what the tribunal would do, and because it is representative of all the peoples of the world, it would be equitable, it would be just, it would be fair. So these are among the most salient, the most basic principles outlined by the Universal House of Justice in the peace statement. And to date, the peace statement has been presented to and received very positively by our rulers and leaders throughout the world.
Throughout the world. I've heard there's been over a million copies of the plan released so far.
Over 1 million copies in the last year. From November 1985 to November 1986, there were 1 million copies, and I believe it was over 75 different languages just in that 1 year.
You were saying that the Baha'is are offering this plan to the world. Do you think it will be necessary for the world to become Baha'i first before peace is established?
No, I don't think that's necessary at all. And we don't have that anywhere in our writings either. One of the things that is essential to the teachings of Baha'u'llah and our faith as Baha'is is that when a new prophet, or what we call manifestation, comes into the world, and by manifestation I mean the founders of the world religions like Jesus Christ, Moses, Muhammad, Zoroaster, Krishna, Buddha, Baha'u'llah, when one of these beings comes to the world, he comes not just for his followers. In other words, Jesus didn't just come for the Christians, and Moses didn't just come for the Jews, and Baha'u'llah didn't just come for the Baha'is, but they come for the whole world. And by that I mean that they give us guidelines and principles and laws that are going to structure the entire planet, very often unbeknownst to the common man. Whole civilizations are built based on their teachings. I'll give you a great example. Baha'u'llah, over 100 years ago, in of all places, Persia, talked about the equality of men and women. Now this is in an environment where, literally, men trade wives kind of like kids trade baseball cards in Carbondale. And yet Baha'u'llah said, wait, equal rights, equal opportunity, equal pay, all these things he talked about, equal spiritual obligations, all these things he says you must have. And in fact, he compared mankind to a bird. Man is one wing and woman is the other, he said. If one wing is broken or held back, the bird cannot fly properly. He says equality of men and women. Well, now we see how the equality of men and women has really taken hold of the minds and hearts of people around the world, and they're beginning to see how important that is. Now my point is, the common person who believes in the equality of men and women still knows very little about the Baha'i faith of Baha'u'llah. And yet, Baha'is believe that because the manifestation, the prophet of God for this day, enunciated that principle and put it into the atmosphere, it is inevitable that that principle will be accepted by the peoples of the world. There are many principles like that. Economic justice, the abolition of all prejudice, especially racial prejudice. These are principles of Baha'u'llah which we believe are going to come to pass, are going to find soil in the hearts and minds of people, and are going to grow and flower until these thoughts encompass the whole world. Little by little, we believe people will recognize the divine origin of these principles, of these teachings, and they will turn to Baha'u'llah again for a blueprint or a model of world civilization and how we can make this whole thing work as a global community. But no, we don't think we're going to have world peace, or rather have all Baha'is before we have world peace, but it's inevitable, we think. It's no doubt that Baha'u'llah's presence and bringing these teachings to the world is the major catalyst for this movement towards world peace and a global community.
So basically what you're saying is that it goes far beyond than just a bunch of really good ideas written down on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
There are forces at work here that are literally revolutionizing human society.
Absolutely, and changing, restructuring the minds and hearts of people throughout the world.
I was thinking, a couple of years ago I stopped at a small cemetery up by Chester, just north of here, and it was primarily, there was a couple of dozen graves in the cemetery, and they were primarily from the Civil War era. And I was trying to visualize what life for these people would have been like living there, and then try to imagine what it would be like for them to come here in this time period right now, and to see what their reaction would be and how they would function. And it's hard to imagine how much the world has changed in the last 100 years since Baha'u'llah came. And it is literally a brand new age. You know, you hear so much talk about the new age, you know, but this is some concrete evidence of that it has dawned. You mentioned technology, the art, the literature, the medicine.
Sure.
So there is something going on in the world, and Baha'is think that the reason why things are changing is because a new prophet came.
The coming of a new messenger, a new manifestation.
He quite literally fulfills the prophecies of all the world's religions, and this is one way they all talk about coming together sometime, and Baha'is feel that this is how it will be accomplished.
Exactly.
This is an incredible age we live in. Let's see. About the peace plan again. There was a conference in San Francisco. Was it last year?
Yes.
Where the Baha'is kicked off a huge rally for peace. Can you comment on that at all?
Unfortunately, I was not able to be there, but it was a very large conference. One of the things that was unique was that not only was it the largest Baha'i conference ever put together in the United States, but it included among its speakers and its participants a significant number of non-Baha'is who are also interested in peace and know that the Baha'is have a very unique approach to peace and building a global community. It's very successful, very well represented in terms of racial diversity, various factions, both political, economic, racial, cultural, a real coming together of the human family, saying that, look, we all want peace. Yes, we're different. Yes, we have different perspectives, different philosophies, but by golly, we know peace is the future of humanity. Peace is the future of our species, and we want to make it happen. We want to do it, and we think you Baha'is have a way to go about it. Tell us what it is. And it was quite a celebration of humanity.
They had some of the foremost experts on peace and world justice there, and from what I hear, these experts themselves said, you Baha'is have the plan. This is the way the world can be restructured.
Exactly.
Would you please not be so
quiet
about it? That's one problem. Baha'is don't get pushy, but at the same time, it's becoming so urgent to get the message out there.
Sure.
The fundamental teaching that underlies all the Baha'i teachings is the equality of the oneness of mankind.
Yes.
In Carbondale, we've had several meetings and picnics, and we're trying to get people to think in this direction. Do you have any comments on this, or what's going on in Evanston, or what you've seen in your life? Or is it possible? I think I talk to people, and there seems to be a lot of despair. I talk to black people, and they think there's no way that the black race and the white race can get together. You talk about, see the Chinese race, and they say, you know, there's just so many barriers, and
well, I think one of the reasons that people are somewhat discouraged is that historically we have worked very hard at changing legislation. We've worked at changing laws. In other words, we have worked at forcing people together, cultures and races and ideologies. And what we are only now beginning to realize is that there isn't going to be any lasting change until we change hearts. And that's a different process. Legislation does not change hearts. It doesn't change attitudes. And we realize now, very slowly, that when we begin to change hearts and minds and attitudes, then we'll see a lasting change. That change fundamentally is spiritual. And that's where the messenger or prophet or manifestation of God comes in, to change the hearts of men.
That's one thing I know in Carbondale. I know many people that belong to various churches and of different races. And it seems to be a sad statement that each racial group has its own church.
Yeah.
Where they each split up on Sunday to go their own different ways.
No segregated time of
And
the
then
week
they,
is Sunday morning.
they talk about how what a wonderful thing it would be to establish a unity
Right.
on the planet, and yet the one institution that exists to establish this thing is, I don't know if it's powerless or just doesn't have the interest in doing it. That's one thing that really impressed me with the Baha'is when I became a Baha'i in Chicago, is all of a sudden racism just seemed to evaporate. That not only, it's almost like it just ceased to exist. In fact, there's an opposite approach where Baha'is seem to yearn for racial diversity. They really strive for it.
Sure.
I think that is very important. We've got, about 1 minute left. Do you have any closing statements or closing thoughts that you would like to say to the people of Carbondale and the people of...
You know, being in a university environment here, it's very obvious that you have some of the most seeking, the most sincere, the keenest, the sharpest, the most searching minds in the country, right here in your community. And you're very fortunate. And I think with such enlightened minds, Carbondale has got to grow, it's got to develop, and a lot of the problems that we see out there will probably be worked through right here in Carbondale through the resources that you have naturally at your university. So I commend you for the work that you're doing, especially for this wonderful television program. And I encourage the people to go out for themselves and look, investigate the claims of Baha'u'llah and see if it doesn't make sense to you.
Right. That's really the only thing Baha'u'llah asks. He doesn't ask you to believe blindly. He says,
no.
Please investigate my teachings.
That's right.
And if you want to investigate the teachings, there are books in the library. The Baha'i phone number is in the phone book, so we encourage you to look into the Baha'i faith.
Joel, thank you very much. Okay. It's been my pleasure.
Our guest today has been Morris Taylor from Evanston, Illinois. And it's been very pleasant talking with you, and I really appreciate you coming on the program.
My pleasure.